Athlete. Hi, Annette.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you so much for joining.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure to be here.
So, I'm just going to introduce what we're doing right now to some people who might be joining for the first time.
Sure.
So, this is part of a series of talks that we've been having this past month about mental health. We want to open up the dialogue around mental health and just bring to the table issues that are not sometimes talked about. And we also think that with these talks, we could help break some of the stigma. So this is what we're trying to do. If anyone listening has any topics that they'd like to see, you can just drop it on the comments and we'll try to incorporate them in some way. So today we're talking to Annette. Annette, would you like to tell us a bit about you and what do you do?
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. So my name is Annette Paterakis and I work as a mental coach, mostly with equestrian athletes, but also athletes in general. And I basically help them, in a nutshell, I help them be the best version of themselves. So anything from helping them with confidence and believing more in themselves to setting goals together or letting go of fear of failure or fear around getting injured, which is, of course, a huge deal in equestrian sport. Um, so yeah, that is in a nutshell what I do and what I really am very passionate about.
Yeah, and talking about mental health with athletes must be such an interesting thing because there's usually, I mean, if there's stigma around mental health among athletes, there's usually this idea that you have to be strong and you can't show any weakness. But
Exactly.
we can approach that a bit later. So I wanted you to tell us a bit about your mental health journey and how
Sure.
you became an equestrian mental coach.
Yeah, of course. Well, that is, like you mentioned a little bit what I struggled with myself. So I started as a rider, as an equestrian athlete, and I already quite young, I started competing up to international level. And it meant that I went from winning every weekend to suddenly um, actually, like once I stepped up a few levels going international, I suddenly was amongst very good company and I was not winning anymore. And I was probably a little bit out of my league, having skipped a few levels, and which meant that basically suddenly I was actually getting eliminated and really things weren't going well. So for me as a teenager, that was really hard, and I just didn't really know how to cope with that. I'd never been taught how to deal with, these failures and setbacks, and I had been doing so well before, and now suddenly I, I didn't know how to get around the course. So that was quite a challenge for me, and I remember really kind of turning inward and closing up and keeping it all in, feeling like I had to be strong, and I, again, couldn't show that weakness. So not really knowing who to turn to or how to change it. So then, luckily, at some point, I found a mental coach, and I worked with him on, how can I deal with this pressure at the horse shows. I could ride really well at home and perform really well at home, but then at a competition, I would just kind of crack under that pressure. So it was really coming up from, a place of I needed to learn how to cope with that in order to get ahead in the sport. And working with that mental coach really got me very interested about the mental aspect of the sport. And I just carried on reading about it. And then I decided to actually study applied psychology. And it just, became a huge interest for me and passion for me. And at some point, I decided, like, why not combine this experience in the sport with the knowledge in psychology and help other athletes to yeah, help them be, more confident, and also, coming from a place that I've gone through, that I can help them and recognize that and really understand it and kind of speak the same language. So yeah, I think where I am now, I've worked now as a mental coach for 8 years almost, and yeah, it's a real still passion to be able to help riders and athletes in general to not only do better and perform better, but also to really understand how important it is to, I really enjoy that journey because it's, like life, athletes also have
Yeah.
ups and downs, and it's really about embracing that and learning from it and yeah, actually being able to be confident regardless of what happens in life and to yeah, feel fulfilled regardless of the results. So yeah, that's where we are now basically, and helping athletes do that. So that's really, yeah, fun for me anyway.
Yeah, that is so interesting that you tell people to enjoy the ride because that's sometimes we get so in our heads and we're just focused on this one goal that if we steer from it and we don't achieve it, it's like you can't get your head out of the sand and
Exactly.
enjoy the journey. And that
Yeah.
is so, so important. And
Yeah,
feeling confident even if you don't achieve all your results at once.
exactly. Like, I think because I went through that myself, I firsthand experience how, especially when you actually have good results at a young age, you get really fixated on those, goals and results. And then when you don't get that anymore, you could really feel lost because, you've started to really identify with that, and it gives you such a boost and it gives a lot of confidence. But actually, what I've learned as a mental coach is that it's really important that we stay connected with why we do what we do, and that is usually not related to results at all. That is to do with an equestrian sport, for example, is just the love for the horse, maybe in another
Yeah,
sport, it's just the love for the game, or it's just maybe the love for supporting and helping other people. And I think it's easy to get carried away when things don't go well and when they do go well. But it's really important to stay connected to why you do what you do. Yeah, that's my own experience, and also working with people. I've seen what a huge difference that makes on your journey and feeling fulfilled and enjoying it as well.
yeah, for sure. I just want to make a quick pause and just tell anyone listening if you want to drop some questions on the comments, we can address them later. And talking about your personal experience, as you were saying, I know that you use that and you leverage on that to help your clients. So I wanted to know, how do you actually help your clients and how do you use your personal experience to make it better for them?
Um, yeah, so I basically, like I said, I work with clients on many different topics. And basically my work is twofold. First of all, I give them, like in terms of sports psychology, I give them theory and explanation as to why they suddenly make these mistakes or why things don't go well when the pressure is on. So they also understand their own brain. And so I'm huge into understanding how our brain works so we can work with it instead of against it.
Yeah,
Then on the other hand, I also, having been educated as a coach, I really love to help my clients to, through questions, come up with their own answers. So obviously, as you can imagine, athletes, they often also deal with limiting beliefs that are really underlying certain confidence issues, for example. And so the second part of my work is really to help them and coach them to understand themselves better, to find their own answers, and to give them tools that they can use also in the future to feel more empowered. So yeah, um, I use, actually, I've tried and tested many different tools, like for example EFT, which stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. It's a tool that I use myself a lot, and yeah, I just find it really helpful. Anything from letting go of an emotion when after a discussion with someone, for example, and you really feel this emotion of frustration or anger or whatever it may be, often we don't
Yeah.
really know how to let go of that. We don't know how to change that. And so we either ignore it or we run away from it and we just bury ourselves in something else. And neither of those two are really helpful strategies. So, EFT is a great tool to help to actually acknowledge what's going on and to be able to let go in a helpful way of those unhelpful emotions. So obviously at competitions, this is such a great tool as well. And yeah, I in a way like that, I help my clients feel empowered with their own tools, and they kind of fill their backpack with different exercises and tools that they can use when they are in a situation where they need it. So yeah, like I think a theory approach and a practical approach, and coaching them to along the way, and yeah, that's in a nutshell how I work, I would say.
Yeah. And you talked about limiting beliefs.
Hmm.
What are some limiting beliefs that athletes or people that you've encountered sometimes have? And maybe tell us some that other people who are not athletes might be able to relate to,
Hmm.
and how you help them get over them. How does
Sure.
that work?
Well, from my experience and also from what I've read, is that the most common limiting belief we all have in common is I'm not enough or I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
And obviously, this translates to anything in life, from trying to get a job to finding a partner in life to doing
Yeah.
well as an athlete. It is an underlying belief that can make or break your decisions, your behavior, your performance. So it's obviously what I found is, I in the beginning of working as a mental coach, I was, giving them all these exercises, but I always noticed that sometimes there was something like a roadblock, something holding them back, and I couldn't really break through. So I looked at that closer and realized that this really had to do with those limiting beliefs that were underneath what was going on a rational level. We often were not really even aware of those subconscious limiting beliefs. We in most cases, within the first 7 years of our lives, 6, 7 years, we're almost like in download mode, like a sponge. We're taking in all the things we hear and see around us from the people around us, and we kind of, as we don't have any beliefs of our own, we just kind of adapt them and take them in. So that is often where already a lot of our beliefs about the world and ourselves originate. And so, what I do in my work is basically help figure out what those underlying beliefs are, especially the limiting ones, the ones that are helpful. We can keep those,
Yeah.
but it's really important to realize that we can change our limiting beliefs and turn them into more helpful ones. So again, this is where a tool like EFT comes in. Another method that is based on EFT is called matrix reimprinting, which is perhaps a little complex to explain in today's interview, but EFT helps, for example, to again acknowledge what's actually there underneath the surface. So let me give an example. This was not exactly related to a limiting belief, but it's quite interesting to just see how EFT works. So I had a client that I was working with, and she'd had a really bad accident. Her horse tripped through an obstacle, and they both fell, and she broke her neck. So she rehabbed for 6 months and then got back on the horse. In the meantime, a lot of people have been asking her, "Oh, are you going to be scared?" And she was like, "No, no, I think I'll be fine." But obviously, it goes on in the background. And at some point, she was back on the horse and it was going well. And she started jumping again with her trainer and just little jumps at home. But what happened was at some point, After an obstacle, the horse tripped a little bit, and her neck or her head went back, and she heard it like a sound in her neck. And in that moment, she really got very scared. And so, like actually felt unable to continue and to jump. So she called me and we had a session. She came over, and with EFT, I basically helped to really break down, and while using the technique, we just kind of analyzed, or we just talked through what happened. But instead of just talking about it, which is usually done in talk therapy, let's say, we were basically, in a nutshell, we're basically activating points on our body that are connected to the inside of our body. So this sounds a little bit strange. I'm very aware of that. But basically what happens, and research shows that when we activate those those points, meridian points, that basically is also used in acupuncture and Chinese medicine, when we activate those points, we really quiet down the amygdala in the brain. And this is like our fear system in the brain that is overactive when we're scared, or gets really triggered when we're in a dangerous situation. So being able to calm that in a very efficient way, like with breathing, but also with the tapping, and sometimes the EFT or tapping is even more effective, I find. It really helps to walk through what happened while calming down the amygdala. And so because of that, the brain kind of reinterprets what happened. And you're, instead of pushing away, no, I'm not scared, or I hope I'm not scared, you're actually acknowledging, yes, I'm really scared. What happened there was really freaking scary. And that is actually what I found really key to getting past something, is to first acknowledge how you really feel. And because we're often trying to push that away, we sometimes not really aligned anymore with how we really feel. So as you can appreciate, it's not easy to explain this tool in a few minutes, but just to give you an example, through that one session with that client, we let go of that fear completely, and she carried on jumping, riding, and she's now jumping again at the highest level. So just to give you that background of how powerful EFT can be.
Yeah, that is so amazing, actually. And I love your take on just instead of going around the issue, just facing it. Let's face your fear and let's deal with it.
Yeah.
Just picking up on a question that Pedro, also from Haga Group, left here, which is something I also wanted to ask. How do you feel, or how have you noticed that this current pandemic has affected your athletes' mental health? And what are some of the things that we can do while in this state of crisis to maintain our mental health and our well-being?
So what I've noticed is, or my theory is that our mental state or our mental health, I feel with this pandemic, it's kind of been reinforced. So for example, if you've always been a little bit fearful or anxious, this has now been reinforced because there is so much news around us of what's going on, and things that trigger fear. So similarly, I think also people who have created helpful mental habits, they have also, been able to perhaps taken this time to make the most of actually this time to better themselves. So I would say, like I said, this pandemic has really reinforced and shown, like, already maybe where you are right now when it comes to your mental health. Whether that is in a not so good place or in a great place, that is not not a problem. It's about, again, just facing where you are and acknowledging where you are now, and then looking at, okay, how can I improve that? How can I change that? And maybe now is the time to actually work on that mental health. See, I don't believe that you you either have confidence or you don't. You either have mental health issues or you don't. I think we're always somewhere on a spectrum between the two.
Yeah.
Everyone, I don't really believe in you know, you having mental problems. I just feel like either
Mhm.
you have good mental skills and acquired mental habits, or you haven't yet, and that can change. So
Yeah.
obviously, as a mental coach, I've built my own tools and habits that I think are really helpful, and I use them myself, obviously. And I think it's important to also recognize that even for me, I've been working on this for over 10 years. I still sometimes have a bad day, and I still sometimes really struggle. And I think
Yeah.
it's becoming very clear to me that it's very important to just be very honest with ourselves, instead of
Exactly.
portraying something that is not really real. Let's just be really vulnerable and share that, so that vulnerability for me means that we actually share how we feel. And I think social media, is a way, but also just calling a friend, and
Mm.
sharing how you're doing and how you're feeling. I think that for me personally has actually made a difference to actually stay a bit more real and honest with myself. And I think in that way, always looking at how can I be more authentic? How can I be more me? And I feel like that is a really important part of mental health, actually. And athletes too, they've really they can struggle with mental health issues. Even athletes like Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympian ever, acknowledged that he's really struggled with
Yeah.
many depressions. And so I think it's time that we take away the stigma around mental health. And that's why I've really was very excited about this interview, because I think it's time that we start to open up the conversation around mental health and what it really means. Um, I again, like, I think we should step away from that idea that you have issues or not. It's just about, um, you know, how can we acquire skills and habits that really work. And I think
Yeah.
that is, like, to me, that should be the starting point.
Yeah, I agree. And it comes with what you said, like acquiring new habits comes with you admitting to yourself, for one, and then to others that I haven't been doing so well. And that's fine. That's actually a relief when you do
Mm,
admit it. You're like, okay, I don't have to keep hiding. That's like another homework that I've added on top of my list. I don't have to hide it. I can just be honest and actually deal with it. And
exactly.
and as you said, it's so important to stay connected and sometimes talk to a friend, talk to a family member. And
Yeah.
that is our idea with Hugger Group, just creating these communities of support groups where people
Mm,
are connected and people create a community and a support group
yeah.
and a support network. And you stop feeling isolated,
Yeah.
which is what people feel when you don't talk about mental health. You think you're the
Indeed.
only one feeling that. Like,
Indeed. And then obviously being in a pandemic and going into lockdown, it again and emphasizes already not really having that habit of sharing how you really feel, being open. So
yeah,
I think I raised this because I used to keep everything for myself. And as an athlete, I didn't even acknowledge to myself that I was scared on the horse, because I in
yeah,
my mind, I was not as a professional, as a full-time rider, I wasn't supposed to be scared. So
yeah,
what I've learned over time is that if you can't acknowledge how you're really feeling, if you're not aligned with what your body is telling you and how what's going on through your mind, that's the first step. You know, you can't work on it unless you face it and acknowledge it. So in my work, that's also often what I do with my clients, is to really help them acknowledge what's really going on. And
Yeah.
that's where we start, you know, and being able to talk about it to someone is so incredibly important. And for me as well, over the last year, and especially now during this lockdown, it's helped me so much to have built a network of like-minded people that I can turn to, friends, but also an EFT group of people who do use the EFT in the matrix as well. And together we use the tools in a group setting, and over Zoom we talk about what's going on. And so I think it's one of the things that is very helpful to cope with mental health and bad days, and to, it's not that you don't feel negative or doubt ever again. You will. Um, I do too. But it's more like it doesn't have to bring you down so much anymore. It can just be a little
Yeah.
blip and then you just carry on, you
Yeah.
know? So
Yeah.
yeah, I really think it's a great initiative what you guys are doing, and I suggest for everyone listening that yeah, like reaching out, it can feel a little bit of resistance at first, like, oh, do I really have to? But you know, like if you take that step, if you make that phone call, you usually you feel really relieved afterwards, right?
Yeah. And sometimes I feel that you think when you're keeping things in, that if you let them out, the whole world's gonna fall apart. And
Yeah,
then you call a friend and you tell how you're feeling, and the sun comes out the next day and the flowers
exactly.
still bloom and everything. The world didn't implode because you told someone how you felt and actually
Yeah,
you felt better.
yeah, that's right.
Someone wrote here, wait, one sec. Skills and wait, I'm very bad at this, honestly. Okay, I got it. Skills and habits that really work. So this would be Richard. I think he's asking, so if you could tell us like some of the skills and habits that you put in practice, just maybe one or two that you actually think work in maintaining your mental health and being confident, any of the things that you work on.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is really just kind of like mental hygiene, you know, like brushing your teeth in the morning. I believe in having a short but really consistent morning routine that you incorporate into your day. So I start my morning with like a short morning routine, which is a breathing exercise of deep breathing, abdominal breathing. And
That's
I
so important.
actually, yeah, I love doing that. I actually use biofeedback to measure how I'm doing. That will help me improve over time, but also to just stay aware when I get distracted, because actually I do get distracted really quickly. So this is a great way to train your focus as well. Then after a breathing exercise, I usually go through a bit of gratitude. I don't write it down, but I just go through it and I really kind of activate and I try to really feel gratitude in my body. So I found that just thinking about gratitude, like, oh, you know, I feel grateful for my dog, my husband, my family, in that order. Don't tell anyone. Um, it doesn't really do that much, but if I think about my dog running around in the garden, like doing silly things, and I see that image, I start to feel gratitude. So
Of
that's just
course.
a little way of recognizing how important it is to also feel that emotion. And
Yeah.
then after that, I just go through a few daily affirmations that I created over time for myself. I repeat them 3 times to just, affirmations for me are a way of reminding myself and focusing my brain on how I want to show up during the day, what I want to focus
Yeah.
on, who I want to be, and also what I
Yeah.
want to attract. So
Mm.
after that, finally, I just quickly visualize a few goals that I have, and I again kind of bring them to life, stepping into it as if I'm there. Visualization is such a great tool, not just for athletes, but in general. It's changed my life, because whatever you focus on, that's where you're going. So if I'm focused
Yeah.
on what I don't like in my life, and I'm constantly thinking about that and thinking about that, it tends to
Yeah.
keep building, and it stays there, and you don't get out of it, and you don't see past those problems anymore. But if you instead start to really focus on what you want your life to be and what would be your ideal life scenario, it if you really exercise that for just a few weeks, you will start to feel so much energy and excitement. And that energy and excitement will start to shift your whole focus. And you start to see past the problems, and you start to suddenly come up with these great solutions. You
Yeah.
start to suddenly come up with, things coming on your way that can help you achieve what you want to achieve. So yeah, I
Exactly.
think visualization is a great one. So that is for me my morning routine. And I've just it's usually between 10 and 20 minutes in the morning, every working morning. That's what I do. And then whenever I need it, I'll use the EFT myself as well. And usually that's like a daily thing, even just letting go at the end of the day, unwinding. I use it to just kind of let go. So those are, I would say, some basic skills that I recommend everybody use. And even if you just start with 2 minutes in the morning, just taking a few deep breaths, being aware of your body
Yeah.
instead of being in your
I
head,
know.
that it
Yeah.
just in itself can be such a great start to your day.
I agree. I agree. And I agree with the visualization part. I think some people think that visualization and affirmation is just you, it's just like basically you believing in a magic. Like if you think about it, something will happen. But actually, if you think about it in a positive way, as you said, your mind starts to open up to the possibilities because you're so focused on that
Hmm.
that you maybe you were stuck in a rut before and you couldn't figure out how to get there, and because you put so much positive energy on it, you start seeing the ways out, and that like opens up your creativity, which is what you need to like achieve your goals sometimes.
Exactly. Like it's important to not ask too much of the how question. If you visualize and you
Mm,
think, how am I going to get there? Like, I want to make $1 million. How on earth am I going to do that? If you keep asking yourself that, you're going to keep getting from your brain, well, I don't know. So it's
yeah,
important to first just get excited about it. If you have
yeah,
that, if you want to really make a big impact in the world and change someone's life in a positive way, how would that make you feel? What would you do with that? Or how would you feel if that would have happened? And so just starting again with tuning inward and getting excited, and actually realizing that you can change your physical state as well as your mental state within a few minutes, and then as you practice, within a few seconds. And obviously that's really key for athletes, that they can quickly shift into a state that they can
of
really
course.
perform. But in daily life we need that too. If you have an important call suddenly coming up, you also want to be able to shift gears and be able to get into a great state really quickly. So these are all things that you can acquire, you can train. These are just skills and habits that you want to practice. And again, I believe that these are just things that isn't it, it's not just for athletes, it's for anyone who would like to really improve in life and reach their goals in life and want to be the best version of yourself. Then it's
Yeah,
it's
for
um
sure.
it's about looking at what works and really utilizing that.
Yeah. All right, one last question, great question also from the comments. How can you guide a friend to embrace a space to be vulnerable with strangers? This is such a good question. Thank you so much, Richard.
So let me see if I get that correctly. So how can you help a friend who is being vulnerable with you? Is that the question?
I think maybe the question is someone who's not usually used to being in a vulnerable space, how can you guide them to embrace that and just be vulnerable with friends?
Right. Okay. That's
I
a
think he's
really
writing something, but if that's
okay.
not it, Richard, just comment on it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, answering that last one, I would say, first of all, I think it's really key to
Yeah.
understand that everybody is on their own journey.
Yeah.
And if you want to help a friend, I think it's important to first of all accept their pace, their journey, and help them as best as you can, but it's not your responsibility for them to make them vulnerable. What you
Yeah.
can do is you can ask questions. Usually what is way more effective, instead of saying, hey, why don't you open up more? Or, hey, why are you just not more vulnerable? Or, you're safe with me. You can just say whatever you want. Usually I found it's not very effective. But if I ask a question like, hey, you don't seem very happy today, or did I see that correctly? Just kind of commenting on what you notice, maybe in a very subtle way, and asking if you got that right, can be a way to maybe help them open up. Um, yeah, like if they're not ready to open up, that's okay too. You can, again,
Yeah.
you can ask questions, but if you notice some pushback or not really getting anywhere, I would suggest to just go with them, and
Yeah.
in
Respect.
general, yeah, I often get asked, like, how can I help another person? And it's a really challenging one because we don't have 100% control over another being. You can help in the best way possible, but it still might not be enough, or it might not be what they need, or they might not be ready yet. So, what we do have 100% control over is ourselves. So, what I always say is, if you want to help someone else, or if you're struggling in a relationship, first look at, what can I change? How can I improve this? Or how can I show up more vulnerable? Usually, what I
Mm-hmm.
found is when we lead
Sorry.
by example,
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
we are vulnerable and we open up and we share how we feel in an authentic way. I think is usually the most powerful way to also get the people around you to that next level, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that those are three things that I would really keep in mind. Accept and really appreciate someone else's journey. Um, they might have to learn it in their own way. Um,
Yeah.
and you can help by asking questions, by listening, by pausing, maybe, by really tuning in. And besides that, just really leading by example and being vulnerable yourself, and looking at, like, how can I cope with this in a better way, or how can I improve this? And I think that that is how I would go about it.
Yeah. That, I mean, that's great advice. I also agree, leading by example and creating that space. I mean, before wanting to create that space between your friend and others, create that space between the two of you. You be
Hmm.
vulnerable, you open up, make it a safe space for them to reach out and talk about whatever they're feeling.
Exactly.
Um, Annette, this has been a great, great talk. I've learned so much with you. Thank you so much.
My
Everyone
pleasure.
go check out her page. It's full of interesting content. And thank you so much again. This is
My
lovely.
pleasure. For those following, if you would like to learn more, do follow my Instagram, because I am working on my second book. And once that comes out, you will definitely know about it through my social media. So yeah, stay tuned over there. And thank you so much for this
Great.
opportunity. I really enjoyed our chat.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much. And guys, go check out the coming days for the new book. Thank you. Thank
All
you so
right.
much.
Thanks so much. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.
You too. Bye. Bye.